defined as communication in a sports setting. There's a lot of different sports settings and a lot of different ways that communication can be integrated into that. You're going to talk about different fields, different aspects of sports communication, including organizational, interpersonal, crisis communication, media relations and PR, sports advertising, mass media representation, publishing and visual, sports finance, legal aspects of sports, the roles of race, gender, and sexuality in sports. All these different things can be discussed in a sports communication class. And today we're lucky to have people from 3 different aspects of sports communication here. Sports communication and sports management programs have really sort of exploded here in recent years. So we have people from 3 different aspects. We have someone from the management side of Todd Montana in the middle here, many of you know. Right? We have Stacy Gigante from the sports medicine or support services side. And then we also have Larry Bean, teaches sports communication at BU, and has also worked as a sports editor for many years. So basically, I'll give you a brief bio of each, and then we'll introduce her. Larry Bean is a former newspaper sports editor and sports writer. He's been teaching sports communication at BU since 2011, and has taught sports communication and sports writing here. So many of you do know him. Now he's an executive editor at Robb Report magazine. Stacy Gigante holds her Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication Arts from Framingham State University. She began working for the Division of Sports Medicine at Boston Children's Hospital in June 2007, so she has some great experience in the support services and sports medicine aspects of sports communication. Her current position is an executive assistant to the Chief of Sports Medicine and project coordinator. She encompasses a lot of planning and traveling for international meetings, overseeing 4 social media pages, which will be interesting to you, ordering promotional items, print collateral, arranging medical coverage for major ballet performances in Boston, and planning sports medicine conferences. And finally, Todd, who many of you know, joined the LaSalle College Athletic Department in January 2012, and he's the Director of Sports Information and Event Manager. Prior to coming to LaSalle, he held the same position at Green Mountain College in Vermont. And he also has taught basketball at various different institutions. So I'd like to welcome them all, first of all. And then basically I'm going to begin the panel by asking some questions. And about halfway through or so, I will leave the table open for you to ask some questions. We really want to gear it towards how this panel can prepare you for a career in sports communication. Right? So some of the different possible careers that you could have, and we'll talk about a few of them. But I'd like to begin just by asking each of them to tell us a little bit about themselves and basically, how their jobs involve both sports and communication. So, whoever wants to begin.
My name is Stacy Gigante. I work for Boston Children's Hospital in the Division of Sports Medicine. I work for marketing. I'm a liaison for marketing and communications for sports medicine. So we have a group that consists of a few people from sports medicine and then a few people from the marketing department whose focus or service line has to do with sports medicine. So we, as you said, we have 4 social media pages that we manage in-house. We have print collateral. We have over 30 sports injury prevention tip sheets that we hand out. So we are in charge of the writing and designing of all of those. We have them available online on our website, which we're also in charge of updating in-house. Each department of the hospital is in charge of updating their own website. We do a lot of different events around Boston. We set up at the Boston Marathon Expo. We do a lot of the BAA events. We do smaller events. We do cheerleading competitions. What we do is just set up a table. We have different print material. We have giveaway items, and we kind of gear it toward what our audience is. We see all ages, so we kind of fit in with both adults that are runners or weekend warriors, and then we also do a lot with concussions, ACL injuries with younger kids, and trying to get that out there and trying to keep parents, patients, potential patients informed of the services that we provide.
Todd Montana, Sports Information Event Management here at LaSalle. Real quick, for those of you tweeting, make sure you hashtag ComDay so the 1851 gets all sorts of stuff. All right? I know people are on their phones, so I just want to make sure you give them a promotion. At LaSalle, I'm in charge of our athletic department website, stacking all of our athletic events, submitting all that stuff to the NCAA, as well as handling all of our immense media coverage from the Boston media. But a lot of the stuff that we do ends up being promotion of our own athletes by ourselves. We've started trying to use social media to get our message out there about the wonderful things in athletics happening at LaSalle. Hopefully some of you have paid attention to that. But that's a little bit about what I do. My position at other institutions is a little bit different. It's a little different here than it is at, say, Northeastern, BC, that type of thing. But yes, that's what my office does. We liaise with the media and promote our student athletes.
I'm Larry Bean, and I said for the last 4 years I've been teaching sports comm at BU. What I do there, I try to do is use my past experience as a sports editor, sports writer, and talk about some of the skills and strategies that that the communication pros working for teams at the professional college level that they would employ, particularly in how they relate to the media and deal with the media. The present position has more to do with communication than sports in terms of my full-time job. I work with a magazine called Rock Report, but today we'll focus more on sports comm.
Why don't you just tell us a little bit about how each of you sort of obtained your position, what sort of hoops you had to jump through to get there?
As far as at BU, I guess to go back to where I started off as a sports writer, sports editor. I graduated college way back a few decades ago. I actually went to work. I was one of the first employees for a company called Staples, which you've probably heard of, back when they had one store, and did that for about a year and a half, and said I wanted to get into newspapers, I wanted to get into writing. It was something I kind of excelled at, I thought, at college. So I started kind of at the bottom rung and was working doing local sports for a local newspaper, local weekly, which unfortunately paid very little. So I guess I had to supplement my income in a variety of ways. Fortunately, a friend of mine worked for a funeral home, so I would kind of moonlight for a funeral home while also covering sports. So I guess that would be a pretty good hoop to jump through.
I've always been in college athletics. I was literally born into college athletics. My father was a college basketball coach for 30 years. My mother taught physical education, coached soccer, swimming, and track and field. So I'm fond of saying I didn't have a choice. I had to go into the sports world. Somehow both of my brothers didn't do that. But so I graduated from college and I spent 10 years coaching, 4 years as an assistant, 6 years as a head coach. And while I was a head coach at tiny little Green Mountain College in Vermont, we had a very small department where people wore a lot of hats. One of the things I did was help out with our sports information because our soccer coach was our sports information director. So you start learning how to live stat volleyball and do all those things while you're coaching. It becomes a useful skill. Then you decide that it'd be nice to have a life and not leave the office at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you decide to get out of coaching, you're going to sports information where you get to leave the office at 11 o'clock at night.
This was working at Boston Children's was the first job I had out of college. I kind of just needed a job. Even though I was a communications major, I thought I wanted to be a nurse, so I got a job at a hospital. That turned into, we started with doing basic check-in, check-out of patients at the front desk, and then they found a need for sports medicine to have their own little small group within the department to do marketing and communications. And because I had a communications background, they were kind of like, hey, we're going to create this job. Do you want to do it? And I said, okay. And then we've become one of the biggest marketed and marketable departments within the hospital.
I can use this one. So why don't you, just a very general question, why do you think it is important to study sports communication, and how can one benefit from a sports communication related education?
I think it follows the same lines as just studying communications in general, except it's more focused on obviously sports, that different than you're going to market a retail store or some other line that's not related. There's many different aspects of it, and I think when you hear the word sports, you're thinking of the athletes and the actual game that goes on, and not necessarily what we do about writing about it, promoting it, getting information out there about sports medicine, getting information about stats and promoting your players.
I think to piggyback on what Stacia was saying, there are so many great things that occur in the world of sports from a marketing perspective. Yes, it is, when you focus on sports communication educationally, it's a very focused direction. However, the things that you're learning will apply in a regular communications field. And I'm biased because I've been in athletics for my entire professional career. But I think when you look at the things that coaches do in recruiting, you'll see those things happening 10 years later at admissions offices on college campuses trying to promote their institution. I think when you see things that people at the highest levels of sports information are doing in terms of their social media stuff, their video highlight packages and those things to compete with the ESPNs and that type of thing. If you can learn how to video edit in a sports communication field, you can go cut news highlights if you just want to work in news. So I think it's a great way to learn a lot of exciting and at the front edge of trends in sports communication as opposed to just a regular communication field. But again, I'm biased.
Yeah, I agree that the skills in sports communication apply across the board with the communications field. I think, I assume most of you people in this room are sports fans. And I know myself, I'm a sports fan, but also I'm a fan of I guess, how sausage is made. I like to deconstruct things. I like to see, I see the end result, but I want to know how that end result, how we arrived at that end result. And I think that that's, when you read a sports story, whether it's a game story or a feature, or you see a sports documentary, I think it's interesting to find out how that came together, that it's not just from the journalist's perspective. It's not all the journalist's work that makes that happen. One of the exercises I love to give is I give the students a game story. And I have them circle all the information there that may have come from the sports information person, from the sports information department, communications department. And it's amazing. You'll go through a sports story and 50% of it is information that's furnished by the communications department. And I think that it's kind of eye-opening, I guess.
So you mentioned, Todd, like some of the versatile skills that you could get in a sports communication field. What do you think are some of the current trends and skills that employers are looking for if someone wants a sports communication related position?
I think the biggest thing that you're starting to see right now is this trend towards what everybody's calling new media. A lot of the social media things and how you can use that to promote and market both your athletes, your events, how to interact with fans at home contests. Those are starting to be bigger trends on the professional and even the major Division I side. I think that video is starting to replace writing, which kind of drives me nuts. But I would much rather read a well-written game story than watch 6 highlights of 4 guys dunking in the NBA, but that's just me. So I think those are the 2 things. Learn as much as you can about how people are using social media, and learn as much as you can about how people are using video highlight packages in the sports communication field. But please, whatever you do not stop learning how to write, okay? I know that may come up later, but it is far and away the most important skill that you can have in any field, let alone the communications field. If you can write, you can talk. Okay? You can talk, but you can't always write.
Listen to the man.
I'm kind of going to add to what he said. I think social media is very important, but I think the important part of it, because you might be sitting here thinking, oh, well, I'll do social media. That means I get to sit on Facebook all day. The business aspect of social media, Twitter and LinkedIn, is so much more interesting than your personal side. Your personal side, like once I realized the business part of it, the analytics that goes on in the background of Facebook is just like, it blew my personal page out of the water. It's like, oh, that's boring. On your business end, you can track how many people are viewing it, how many people see it. The same with Twitter. You can even upload your Facebook and tweets so people think you're doing it all through the weekend when all you did was set it up through a system that kind of spurts them out for you. And also with writing, The other thing is when you start having your own social media pages for business, well, I guess you can do this on your own too, but you kind of nitpick and you're like, you actually wrote that up there? That's not even a complete sentence. So that writing aspect is very important, even more so because you're getting it out there to the world and so many people are seeing it within a matter of minutes or even seconds.
I think if you can write, it doesn't necessarily mean you can talk well, but sometimes I prove that a lot. But one of the things too is, it's one of the things I stress is that in terms of trends and what types of skills can be valuable in sports communication is journalistic skills. I mean, basically what's happened is these sports organizations, thanks to the web and social media, have kind of created their own journalism wings. Look at any team, any website, any team, they will have a staff of reporters. There was a press conference the other day for the Bruins, talking about the trade deadline. And 2 or 3 of the questions came from a reporter who worked for BostonBruins.com. Now, as a journalist, I might have some problems with that, but still, it points out the fact that there are opportunities for people focused on journalism to work in sports communication.
So those current skills and trends that they're going to learn, what type of jobs do you think that these many students here, what type of internships do you think that are available to them as people studying communication, sports communication? If anyone wants to sort of unite the two, are there any particular fields or jobs that you think that are really sort of trending now?
I guess I just kind of reiterate what I was saying, that what I'm seeing a lot of blending of journalism and communication. It's really public relations is what it is. So that's definitely something that didn't exist, I don't think, 10 years ago. Also, again, people with PR backgrounds, people with marketing backgrounds, obviously social media skills, very significant.
I think for me, when I'm looking at different things when it comes to evaluating an internship possibility for students, it's always great. Hey, I'd love to be an intern for the Boston Red Sox. That'd be fantastic. It's going to look great on my resume. You know what the Boston Red Sox are going to let me do? Carry peanuts. All right. Maybe pick up the newsroom after the briefing is over, and I might get to listen to some cool questions asked, but I'm not necessarily going to get to do anything. So it's great to get an internship like that on your resume. But make sure the next internship that you get, or the first internship you get, somebody lets you do something, okay? Somebody lets you write a game story. Somebody, if you prove that you are capable of doing it, lets you write a feature. I know students who have worked for me in the past who have come back and said, oh, I have this great internship, I'm working for Nestle. Oh, what is Nestle letting you do? Well, at first nothing, but eventually they let me do some things for their website. I actually got to write something and got a credit on Nestle.com. That's a fantastic internship, okay? So make sure you mix both of those things. It doesn't always matter what's on your resume. It matters what you can bring that your resume doesn't always tell.
I think event planning internships, depending on what aspect of sports communications or sports you want to go into. I know there are some marketing groups within Boston that focus on sporting events or sporting expos. And I actually know that they do have a lot of interns, and their interns are just as involved as their employees are.
Do you think the internship experience is very important? I mean, that's something that we really value, LaSalle. I'd like to know your opinions, and if you had internships in the field, what they were like.
Sorry about that. My internship in my undergrad was actually with working with autistic kids, so that's not really relevant. But I think if you're given the opportunity or you're forced to have an internship in your field of communications, anything can help you as long as, like they said, you're doing something that's actually going to give you some skills before you're even looking for a job and before you graduate.
My personal internship, I studied sport management in college, so I interned at Cornell University in their summer sports camps office, which was really valuable for me because I got a chance to understand the basic operational pieces of, how you deal with 12 summer camps that are occurring over 5 weeks that are being run by 8 different coaches, staffed by 3 different training staffs, those types of things. How registration occurs, how all of that bookkeeping, sorry, Professor Savitz, how all of that happens from an operational perspective. So that was really valuable to me to learn from that perspective. I think whatever skills you can take out of those internships are the most important part of them.
I didn't do any internships, I kind of wish I had. I know in my current position with Rockport, at least 2 members of the current staff began as interns. So they had a chance. I'm not saying that you get an internship someplace, you're going to end up working there, but it is a chance to demonstrate your skills to that company, to that potential employer. But it's a networking opportunity. But I also agree that what Todd was saying about an internship where you're actually able to do something, where you're able to build a clip file, build a resume reel, I think it can be more valuable than one in which you get to do menial tasks. I know at BU a lot of the students have various internships, including Red Sox internships, where they get to do exciting things like load the truck that takes the equipment down to spring training. How useful is that? Minimal, I would say.
I have a student who works for me who was all excited about truck day, wanted to skip work to go to truck day,
So just to go back to effective writing and speaking skills, do you have an instance where, being an effective writer or effective speaker, or I guess vice versa, an instance where your speaking wasn't as effective or your writing wasn't as effective, and that sort of affected your job in some way, shape, or form?
Let's see, what's the biggest thing I've screwed up in my career? I think, for me, in terms of when it's gone really, really well, those are the biggest things that are really, really fun for me in my profession. Writing a game story for me is kind of boring. I get to do over 100 a year, and they're not supposed to be that exciting. But I get to write a piece this summer about one of our student athletes who competed in the McAfee Games. I got to tell our LaSalle readership her story. My first year, we had our first graduating class of senior baseball players who played 4 years here. Getting a chance to give people the insight into that, that was something that, because I didn't write it illiterally, was a really enriching experience for me to get to tell those people's stories in a way that was a little more involved than so-and-so threw this far or had this many hits.
I don't know if there's one instance. I think it's always important to be an effective writer and an effective speaker, especially when you're representing the communications aspect of sports medicine and not the medical aspect. The medical aspect, they can kind of throw words around as they please as long as they give the correct diagnosis. But some other times we'll be in a situation where we're writing the copy for a brochure, and we're talking with writers who are hired just for writing within the hospital. And I kind of question them, and I think other people in the room are like, why are you questioning that? I'm like, because that just doesn't sound right. You're trying to get your point across to parents and patients, and you're talking like you're talking to doctors who have been in the field for over 20 years. So I think questioning them sometimes isn't necessarily what they want you to do, but at the same time, I don't really care as long as our information gets out there correctly.
I would say my full-time job is an editor, so I guess I kind of need writing and editing skills. But it enables me to have a job. I work from home for a company based in California. This is the first time all week I've dressed to come to work.
You look sharp.
Thank you. But it allows me the flexibility to come do this and also to teach on the side. So I mean, having writing skills and working hard at it is really paid off pretty well for me.
There's no debate there. Writing and speaking skills, very important, communication skills. Talk about how often and what capacity your positions require you to deal with members of the media, if applicable. Are you a member of the media?
All the time. Yeah, I mean, I essentially am a media member, so I don't know how to answer that. Oh, but okay, yeah, right. Anyone here know what Rock Report is? Okay, it's basically a luxury magazine, and it's based now out of Malibu, California. And if I'd like to fly more, I'd be out there on a monthly basis visiting. Yeah, so as such, I deal with a lot of writers, with staff editors, assigning stories, working with their copy, working with their stories, developing stories. I also work with a lot of people in the PR profession who are pitching story ideas to me, working with them to develop stories. So I guess I see it from both sides.
I think in the sports information world, it depends on what level you're at, how much you interact with the media. I don't have weekly phone calls with the Boston Globe. Pitch them some stuff via email from time to time. You deal with a lot of smaller news sources occasionally. So people who write the regional columns for the Globe, or reporters from Connecticut who want to cover what students from their hometown are doing will reach out and contact you to get story ideas. Once you develop a relationship and you know what areas they cover, sometimes you can send them things that say, hey, I know you wrote this article about so-and-so 2 years ago, who's from New Hampshire. We have this really exciting thing happening with a New Hampshire kid. Maybe you should cover it as well. So that's sort of what at a place like LaSalle, my profession, does. You go to Boston College and you're the person that the newspaper probably doesn't want to talk to when one of the BC athletes screws up because they want to go talk to the BC athlete directly, and your job is to cover that kid a little bit. So it does vary from spot to spot, but I do think no matter where you are, the Sports Information Office deals directly with the media pretty regularly.
The doctors in our department speak directly with the media when they want to talk to them about different research that has been done, a lot with concussions, ACL tears in female athletes, and also a lot behind the Boston Marathon. We had a large group of our doctors at the finish line and in the medical tent last year, so we had about 2 full weeks last year in April about all these questions coming in, wanting to speak with the doctors on air, on site, and then we're already starting to get some, and they'll probably go through the end of April.
Just to ask a couple more, and I want to open the field for all of you. I know you have some interesting questions to ask as well. But we've mentioned a little bit how the internet and social media has sort of changed the sports world. But could we just cover that a little bit deeper and just talk about how maybe perhaps your role, your position, has changed, specifically Larry, because of the role of the internet and social media, but just in general, how has it changed the sports world?
For sports medicine, I think at first, when we first started our social media pages, it was more of a test to see what we would be able to tweet, what we'd be able to set up posts for. It's kind of an interesting, medicine in general is kind of interesting to market, because what you're doing is saying, we don't want you to get injured, but if you do get injured, we want you to come to us. So we want to let everybody know what's going on. So what we try to do is we offer tips, we offer information, we have all of our information posted online, and it's easier for us because instead of cramming the brochures that we hand out information, we put a little bit here and there, and then we can send them over to our website, which we can change all the time. That's a good thing about anything virtual or online. You can update it, you can change it all the time, whereas print material, it can change the day after you just made 1,000 copies or something.
I think it's certainly speeded up the process of conveying information to the public. It used to be you'd have to wait for the morning newspaper to come out to find out if a trade was made, or catch the 11 o'clock news if you can. Now it's instantaneous. I think also what's significant from a communications perspective is it's helped to it allows teams and other sports organizations to really circumvent the traditional media. You can go directly to the public now, whether it's through social media or on your website. So I think those are the two major changes that have happened. I'm not sure that it's necessarily more coverage, more than there was in the past. I mean, if you go back 30 or 40 years, there were 7 different newspapers in Boston. I think now there's 1.5. So but I think that the two changes. One, information is conveyed much quicker, and information can circumvent the traditional media.
I think you've seen that a lot with sports information as well, where teams are starting to skip the traditional media altogether so that they can put their own spin on things. I think it's great because it's helped athletes at the higher levels start to build their own brand, if you will, because they can put messages out there. It's also probably one of the scariest things for somebody in my position, because guess who gets a phone call when you tweet something inappropriate as a student athlete? Guess who gets to deal with that? But it has also allowed smaller institutions to begin to get their information out there. I read a story about one of our student athletes. You happen to retweet it. Your parents or friends or your friends' parents happen to see that you retweeted it and read the article. There was no way for me to get that information out 7, 8, 9 years ago, unless you sent them the link to our WordPress website, and our WordPress website got forwarded via email and all that fun stuff. So that's been a great change, but dear God, it's dangerous.
All right, is there another microphone that could be passed around?
Well, that was just one of the points I wanted to make, is that removal of the gatekeeper on both sides, both from the media gatekeeper, which would be the editors, as well as the sports information gatekeepers, can be very dangerous and can be very challenging to the people who have to clean up the messes that are made sometimes by writers as well as athletes.
Is there, you have one, okay. So I will open up the floor. Anyone wants to ask questions about these, about their roles, about possible careers you could get in sports communications. So please begin asking questions.
Do you think that social media will soon completely take over written media, such as newspapers?
I hope not. Or at least it happens, not until I retire, because I might be out of a job. So, I actually, in my current position, we use a lot of social media, really to promote our editorial content. So, as we were talking about earlier about the business side of social media, Facebook can be great in terms of getting your message out and getting people to read what you do produce.
I think I see that kind of as the role social media will continue to play as well. I know me personally, I haven't opened a traditional newspaper in 15, 16 years. But I lived in a town of 3,000 people. We didn't have a newspaper. We barely had fire. But 5 years ago, I got on Twitter, and now I know exactly what's going on in the world in the world. Okay, that's how I get all of my news. I open Twitter every single morning, and I scroll the headlines for the Associated Press, or the Huffington Post, because everybody likes entertainment news too. But for all of my favorite sports writers and news writers, across the world, that's how I find out everything that's going on, even if it's just scanning a headline. I would never have opened the world news section of a newspaper. But yeah, I see what's going on in the Ukraine because I see the Twitter headline. And now, you know what? I just saw 4 headlines about something crazy in Ukraine. Maybe I should open it up and read it. Now I have a little of an idea. So I think that's what's been hugely beneficial for it.
So I'll just play devil's advocate with your statement. So I think, I think obviously social media, there's many positive aspects, but I also think that's part of the problem, that we may think we're getting our news from Twitter and social media when in fact it's not really correct news reporting at all. There's bias, there's untruth. So I think there still needs to be a connection between traditional media and new media, And as a communication faculty member, that's what I'm trying to teach, that yes, there are very wonderful aspects to the social media piece, but we still need to remember that we need to fact check. We need to, maybe go and look at a number of other sources. But I understand your point. I mean, if you haven't read a newspaper in 16 years, I can see where it might be, easier in a sense to just get your news from Twitter.
We need to fact check. We need to not spell the letter, or the word "you" as just "you," the word "r" as just an "r."
Well, I think Todd's talking about the news that he's reading. It's traditional news. He's just being directed to it by social media. Essentially, what you're seeing is newspapers disappearing, but not the organizations that put out that news. Same with magazines. There was a line that Stephen Colbert had. He was referring to, he used the word, referred to a magazine during one of his shows. And he stopped him and he said, "Do you know what a magazine is?" And he said, "It's a tablet that burns." It's the same idea. It's the same news. It's just presented in a different form.
I think if we look at the Boston Marathon last year and the way the Boston Globe covered the marathon through Twitter for the first probably 4 hours after the bombings, you see how important Twitter can be and social media can be to the news. But to answer the question is, will it replace printed media? I don't think so, and I hope not, because for at least 4 or 5 months after the marathon last year, the Boston Globe just filled the newspaper with in-depth stories of the bombings and how they affected people, and readership went up as a result of it. So Twitter can do just so much. It can give you the facts from the finish line for a few hours until the editors have a chance to pull the resources and put a story together, but it's, I hope, never going to replace it.
Yeah, and I don't want my response to get misconstrued either. I'm not reading what Kim Kardashian thinks about Ukraine. I'm reading the ABC News story, the Associated Press story, and those things. So that's where you should continue to get your real news on real news things. So I don't really care what Carmelo Anthony thinks about the state of the Knicks. I go read what Ian O'Connor from the New York Post says about the New York Knicks. So at least I get an anti-Knicks bias.
Other questions out there? Come on, don't be shy, Zach.
What do you say is a common misconception that either new hires or interns have about going to your respective fields?
I think, a common misconception in our department is that we get to do all the fun stuff. And while we get to do different things, because there's only 2 of us that do communications in my department, it's not always fun. It's not, like I said, we don't just sit on social media all the time and peruse it. We kind of come up with our own posts. We try to be competitive. There's just a lot of stuff that you probably wouldn't understand until you get there and actually see it for yourself, what you're creating, what you're trying to get out there, what you're brainstorming.
I think in terms of sports writing, I don't think people realize just how much work it involves, and what the hours are like. And this is another thing with social media. It used to be you go to a game, watch the game, go to the pregame and stuff that you have to do, watch the game, do the game story, send it off, go home, go to work the next day. Now you are filing 6 or 7 stories a day, constantly doing it, and it's a grind. And the hours are brutal. I mean, you're basically doing the same hours that professional athletes are, but they can make a heck of a lot more money than you are.
I completely second the hours thing. I think even in sports information, it's one of those, the game's over, everybody gets to go home. Yeah, and I get to go back to my house and now write a story and try and get it out to the news media so somebody will publish it and get it up on our website. I also think in sports information, a lot of people look at it like, hey, he's the guy who keeps stats. And I do, but there are a lot of other fun things that you get to do if you're willing to do the part where you keep stats. I get to write, I get to take pictures, I get to shoot video, I get to edit my own stuff, I get to have input on our website design, I get to figure out our social media campaign. Maybe I'll do some of those things once, today or I don't know, There are so many different things that you can do in that world. I think everybody looks at it and says, I don't want to be a sports information director. And that's great. I'm not advocating for it. But it's a great skill set to have to get you into a field. I had a student who graduated last year who I took to a sports information convention. He was like, hey, I didn't realize you guys got to do all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, some places, their SID does play-by-play for games on their video broadcast. You want to do that, that's a way to get into it. Okay? So don't shut everything down, because there are a lot of things that you can do in every field.
Good advice. Other questions?
Everybody keeps kind of talking about the negative things like print media going away, or as if Twitter or stuff like that are reputable sources. But what do you guys think, and girl, what do you think is kind of a positive outlook, or where you see your industry going in a positive direction in the future?
I don't think print media goes away. That's okay. I mean, it'd be tough for me because I'm still in the habit of opening the sports page in the morning and sitting there reading it with my coffee. But if eventually everything switches over to electronic, that's actually fine for the media companies, because now you eliminate all the costs associated with printing, all the costs associated with distribution, and now it leaves a lot more money for editors and writers. The margins become much lower. I don't, honestly, if print media goes away, that's not an issue. It's traditional media, where you have professional reporters and professional editors checking and double checking what those professional reporters do so that the news you receive is reliable. That's what I don't want to see go away.
I think that's the biggest thing. I don't care if anybody opens a newspaper. Like I said, I haven't in a long time, but I think as long as Larry said, as long as traditional news media is still available, then I think that's a great thing. And the easier it is to get that information, even better.
In the medical industry, I think you're going to thrive regardless of the media because of what you do. It's not media-based, but having media there to help you, having social media there to help you is obviously a positive. I think another thing is people self-diagnose because of what's available on the internet. So that could almost be a problem for us when we want to say, don't self-diagnose yourself, just come in and we'll help you. We'll tell you what's wrong. We don't want you to come in as a hypochondriac thinking that all these things are wrong with you. So I think either way, we're going to thrive from that. And also, a lot of, when we promote conferences, we do a survey at the end. And we've actually found that more people have found out about it from the brochures and save the dates that we mail rather than looking on Facebook and Twitter. We actually had 0%, which we were shocked by, but we were happy that the efforts that we put in to create these brochures and mail them out and the money that we spend is actually worth it.
Other questions? I thought, yeah.
Hi. I actually have a question regarding the Roth Report and just in general kind of internships within the magazine industry. I know that there have been lots of magazines I've personally looked into interning for, and they're owned by Condé Nast, a larger company. So it's difficult to come in contact with somebody or network with people specifically and talk to them in order to get an internship. I was wondering if you had any advice as to, how to network towards, like what kind of stands out to people in the magazine industry, and what an intern would, I know it depends, what an intern would ideally be doing or what they look for in their interns. Just so, because I feel like there's a kind of like a gap between trying to reach the editors or writers and their responses to you, probably because there's a lot of emails come in at you. So what do you kind of look for?
I personally look for someone who has a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. I actually worked for a little bit at a magazine here in Boston called Boston Common, and we would hire interns there as well. And that was a situation with a small operation. It was basically a two-person editorial operation. We relied on the interns. The interns had more bylines than I did in the issue. tell you a story. One of the people, back when the magazine used to be based here in Massachusetts, this guy, young guy, showed up one day at the office and said he wanted to speak to me. I was like, who is this person? And the receptionist said, I guess his name. He just says he wants to speak to you. I said, all right. So I just went out, said, how you doing? Introduced myself. And he said, can I talk to you? I said, sure. He said, I'd like to work here. And I was like, okay. And tell me a little bit about yourself. And he kind of told me, he'd actually done an internship with Boston Magazine, I think, too. So he had a little bit of background. But I ended up hiring him. And he's still working for the company. He's actually a senior editor now. But one of the reasons I hired him, I thought, if this kid is bold enough to come in here, politely, and just say, I'd like to talk to you about this, I thought, I can rely on him to do just about anything. So I guess it was just someone whose personality that caught me, the enthusiasm, the go-get-itness, or whatever you want to call that. So if there's a way to demonstrate that, I think your chances of getting an internship probably, as with any job, if it's a smaller operation, are probably better. Because there'd probably be less competition for it. But also, if you do get that internship, you're going to get to do much more. You're going to get to build your resume, build your clip file, and that way, when you want to move on and get a job, a paying job, and preferably it's a paying internship, you'll have something to show. Okay? Does that help? It's a little bit vague, but just kind of trying to give you an idea.
I had a question.
Morning. I had a related question. I'm hoping to start an internship this summer, and I'm kind of afraid of what you guys have touched on, of getting some internship where I'm not utilized, where I'm left to do menial tasks. What's a strategy or a recommendation you could give to, if you find yourself in that situation, to get out of it?
You're stuck.
I'd say be willing to do anything, even, you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to bring coffee to the CEO every single day. So maybe talk to people once you're in there and you realize that that's what you're doing, just keep bugging them. Say, what can I do? What can I help you with? Is this something you need me to do? I know when we have kind of downtime, we get people who ask what they can do, and then we get people who complain that they don't have the opportunities given to them to fill in when they're needed. Well, no one's going to hand you anything. You kind of need to throw yourself out there and be willing to do anything. And I think that's the same with entry-level positions. When you first start at a place that you think graduating as a communications major, there's this job that's going to open up for you. You just need to start at entry level, be willing to do anything, and then eventually they'll see your persistence and they'll give you more things to do, and you'll maybe land where you want to be or a little bit closer to where you want to be.
I don't think I can give any better answer than that.
It depends on if it's not a clearly defined internship in terms of what your responsibilities are, then offer to do anything. Be enthusiastic. Ask to be given opportunities to do things. That's in my company. The internships tended not to be too clearly defined. So if someone showed the ability to do something, you give them a chance. And if they do well, you give them a little bit more of a chance.
And if they say no when you ask politely, ask again, also politely. I have kids who work for me. Can I write a game story? Yeah. Today's not a good day. If you don't ask me again, I forget. Okay? But if you want to get practice, keep coming back. Keep asking, always politely.
I have faith in Levi, as he's a regular star-studded caller of the Salk and Holly show on WEEI.
With more and more students getting bachelor's degrees these days, how important would you say it is to get a master's degree or an advanced degree in communication?
I'm a graduate student here at LaSalle, and after 7 years of kind of just staying put where I am, I thought, hey, I might as well go get a master's degree so that it can help me at that next level. And also, I'm not quite ready to leave where I am right now, but I was just looking to see that what was out there, and everything was like 5 to 7 years in the industry. Okay, that's fine. And all these lists of tasks and responsibilities, but I was missing that one piece of having a master's degree. And I thought, well, if you take a student that did bachelor's and master's back to back, and they don't have any experience in the field, and then you take somebody that only has a bachelor's degree, but then they have 10 years in the field, it's like, you kind of wonder what's better. But I think that if you have the opportunity to have a master's, even if you get in a job with your bachelor's that you don't love, but you work for a place that will offer tuition reimbursement, that's a great thing to kind of take. They're giving you money to go to school. And I think that's a great thing to look into. And also, I'd say give yourself some time to figure out what you want to do, because you could end up going to your master's or even a different bachelor's degree, something completely different. But instead of hopping from one thing to the next and then realizing after you have your master's degree that this is not what you want to do, you kind of need to get your feet wet and figure out what it is you want to do.
What are you getting your master's in?
I'm getting my master's in communications, in integrated marketing communications, and I just started last month.
Excellent.
Professor Barrett's one of my professors.
More questions, please?
I feel I can follow up on that too.
Absolutely.
I agree completely with that. At BU, I teach the sports comm class I teach is actually open to undergrads as well as grads. And I've had a number of students who have come directly from undergrad into graduate school. And I've had other students who've been out in the workforce for a couple of years. And those who are out in the workforce for a couple of years seem more driven, seem to have a better idea what it is they want to do. I myself, I think 5 or 6 years, I think I was working before I decided to go back and get a grad degree. My undergrad degree was in economics, and spent about a year or so in the business world and thought, I don't want to do this. But I'm glad I didn't then go directly to business school after undergrad. So I would advise the same thing. Try to get into the field that you think you want to work in, and then see how that goes first.
What was your graduate degree?
It's actually in mass communication.
And as somebody who's on track to get his master's from LaSalle in probably 2024 in sports leadership, not communication. For me, I look at it as when people are applying for jobs, there are usually two piles, bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. When you're evaluating applications, you can get from the bachelor's degree pile into the master's degree pile without a master's degree. Okay, because of experience you have, because of people who you know, because of things that you can bring to the job that you've gained in the real world. So don't allow not having a master's to scare you from going for something like that, because everybody nowadays on an application says, bachelor's required, master's preferred. Okay? So don't stop chasing that. But at some point, it is good when you find a situation where you can, even if it's work on it part-time, start getting a master's, because it becomes something else that you can put out there and say, hey, by the way, I was committed enough to my profession to go get an advanced degree in it once I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I think that's where it can be beneficial as well. Yeah, hopefully you learn something along the way, yes.
Other questions? We have time for a couple more.
What would you say is the most rewarding experience of working in your current jobs, and why?
Teaching all of you.
I guess I'll start since nobody wanted to grab the microphone. I think the most rewarding for me, why I really enjoy working in intercollegiate athletics, are student athletes. For 10 years I coached, and the relationship I had with my players was far and away more enriching to me than winning games. When I got out of coaching and moved into sports information, that was something that at first I struggled with. because I didn't have kids who I've been recruiting since they were in high school. I didn't have kids that were in my office because they were having problems academically or socially or with their family or because they wanted advice on something. I lost that connection that had made working in intercollegiate athletics on the college campus really rewarding. Fortunately, to my benefit and probably the detriment of my student workers, I now have that relationship again. But that's what's, for me, was the most important part, is the relationship I get to have with 18 to 25-year-olds.
I think I just enjoy learning and then conveying information that I've learned. And both as an editor and writer, I'm able to do that. And as a teacher, I try to do that. So I guess that's the most rewarding thing is being able to communicate that information, whether it's through the magazine or in the classroom.
For me, I'd say working for about 20 doctors, in a practice with 20 doctors who are running back and forth, they're always in different locations, for them to actually stop and realize what you've done for them, whether it's a conference planning, printing, or creating a brochure or a piece of information that they wanted to get out there, and for them to actually stop and say, oh wow, this looks great, a lot better than I thought it was going to be, or you guys put in a lot of work, I didn't realize how much of work it was to plan one of these things. It's just that acknowledgement that for them they say so little, but it means a lot because they don't really have time to stop and talk to everybody.
Time for one more. One more last question. No? No? Nobody? I could ask another. Is there any sort of ethical dilemma you faced at your job, and how did you handle that?
I don't like being the guy sitting in the middle. I chose my seat poorly. Ethical dilemma. I think I haven't seen it nearly as much here. The last place I worked, ethical dilemma, a good friend of mine was our director of athletics and the sports information director, asked our administration for more support in terms of staff. He was also our soccer coach, and our administration told him, we like the current situation where we pay one person to do 3 jobs. And he resigned in the middle of September, in the middle of soccer season and fall sports and everything else. And having to put on a face with our student athletes, as well as with our local media, that everything was fine and we were okay and it wasn't going to be a big deal. When one of my best friends was now unemployed, when I learned that the administration I worked for didn't actually support our department, but you couldn't really put that message out there. So that wasn't not doing that with our students and not telling them, hey, by the way, things are really bad and my hair's kind of on fire right now, but yeah, everything's good. Go play your game today. Have fun at practice. That was an ethical dilemma for me.
I can't think of any, or at least none that I want to share. But I am interested to see how sports organizations handle ethical dilemmas, and I spent some time in my classes looking at that. Whether it's how the Miami Dolphins handled the Richie Incognito situation. One of the things we did when the Nets signed Jason Collins is I asked the class, what's the press release look like? And we spent a lot of time kind of discussing what it might look like, and I showed them what the actual press release looked like. And it was interesting in that how the Nets handle this. Do we make a big deal about the fact that this is the first openly gay player to play in the NBA? Do we ignore it completely? Do we make kind of a passing reference to it? Turned out they did the latter. They made a passing reference to it. I gave a test the other day, and I created a scenario for the kids, and I said, okay, you work for the New England Patriots, and with the 6th round pick in this year's draft, you've selected Michael Sam. Write the press release. Curious to see how the kids do that, what they think is the appropriate way to approach that. So again, in sports, there are constantly various ethical issues coming up, and how organizations handle that is going to vary from team to team, from sport to sport, situation to situation.
So I guess that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions, and thank our panelists for their lovely discussion.